Thank you. I wanted to sort of follow up, maybe pick up where I left off, referring to the GAO report, but I also want to refer to there's sort of the Officer of Inspector General, I think, in GSA did a report relating to contractors and some of the that aren't living up to the GSA contracts, and lacks oversight over some of that's costing money. Could you address that a little bit and tell me if what you're doing to address those specific reports, because they were pretty scathing in several areas. I mean, it almost looked like some of these contractors were just skating past the rules of the contract with GSA, and wondering if there's some discipline being implemented that could bring that closer to in line.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator Cramer. I agree. I am familiar with that Inspector General report about how GSA is managing their maintenance contractors. There was lax oversight, as they identified, and we have taken some remedial measures to ensure that the contractors are executing what GSA has contracted to do. We are also moving nationwide to a new model of oversight of our contractors. We call it the facilities engineering model that we have fully implemented here in the National Capital Region, which is our largest region, as well as Region 3, in order to increase the amount of oversight and essentially make sure that people are doing what they said they're going to do and maintain these buildings.
I appreciate that. Another report I want to get into is the interim, actually it's gets back to this underutilized buildings, but in the Public Buildings Reform Board, they concluded that billions of dollars are being spent on buildings which should be disposed of, given the new normal of low occupancy. But we do have an opportunity. I mentioned in my opening statement that over 50% of the leases are going to expire in 2027. So taking that, just presuming it's a high number anyway that are coming up due, and then you have underutilization, you're on a trajectory for more consolidation, and disposal sounds like a great idea, but I have a rather basic market question. Is there a market? In other words, if you have all this wonderful, I shouldn't even call it wonderful, all of this space, obviously in various degrees of utilization appropriate for modern business, obviously some limitations. What can you tell me about the market for buildings that might be able to be disposed of if there was just a buyer?
That's a great question, Senator Cramer. What I'll tell you is that it depends.
Yeah.
These projects and these buildings run the spectrum. In November of 2023, as I mentioned before, we announced that we had a plan to dispose of 23 properties. One of them was the Nebraska Avenue complex here in Washington, D.C., where the Department of Homeland Security used to be located before the relocation over to the West Campus of St. Elizabeth's. There is one last component building on the Nebraska Avenue complex, the Intelligence and Analysis Unit of Department of Homeland Security. We're requesting funding in FY25 to build a new, smaller facility on the St. Elizabeth's campus. And when we dispose of that, when we get that funding and build that building, we can sell that piece of property, which is located next to American University in a residential neighborhood in Washington, D.C. There's going to be a great market for that piece of property. Sure. We also just recently announced that we're going to be selling the Liberty Loan building here in Washington, D.C., right along the tidal basin. There were about 200 U.S. Mint employees there. And we work with the U.S. Mint to move them to their headquarters in downtown D.C. And once that building's vacant, we have a plan to sell that, as well as the Webster School here in Washington, D.C. There's a robust residential market here in Washington, D.C., so we're going to be able to more easily dispose of those properties. But as a part of our national portfolio plan, we've looked at all of our assets, and we've looked at the vacancy rate. We've looked at how much rent the agencies are paying versus how much it costs to operate the building. And we're trying to make decisions with our IRA dollars to only invest in core assets, buildings that we intend and think will be a long-term hold, and then to dispose of those assets. And we don't come into it with a presupposition about what the value of that building is, because we have the authority to sometimes dispose of these buildings at no cost, depending on the use for public benefit conveyances. A great example is there was a piece of property next to the San Francisco courthouse. We disposed of that, and it went to a homeless service provider, and they were able to throw up 250 units of affordable housing that was badly needed in the city of San Francisco. Now, it's not our mission to be in the affordable housing business, but it is our mission to dispose of things we don't need because we want to lower our operational costs. And that's what we've been able to do with those 89 consolidations I talked about with the $330 million worth of funding we've gotten over the last 8 years. We were able to not only dispose of things that we don't need, but we were able to do avoidance and operational costs, and then sometimes generate money. Right now, we're selling a piece of property in Laguna Niguel, California. It's an open bid. There are 3 weeks left, and our great disposal team has gotten a bid of $125 million in Laguna Niguel, California, and we're excited about that and selling that property and others.
No, for sure, not all real estate is created equal, and so I think we all understand that, but it's a good reminder. And frankly, I appreciate your San Francisco example, because while you're not in the business of providing shelters, you are in the business of the public good. And using an asset for a public good adds value, whether you get a penny for it or not, as well as sort of disposing of it. Well, good luck to you. You know, continue with some of the recommendations where we can be helpful. And I mean, I think we're in the mood to be very helpful. We're in the mood to be very specific if it's, you know, if it's useful. And we'll encourage you, we'll authorize you to a certain degree, but to the degree that we can be even more specific to have, you know, give you even more juice, if you will, toward your goals. Please, know we're open to that.
Well, I really appreciate that, Senator Cramer, because getting full access to the Federal Buildings Fund and all the rent that agencies are paying to us provides a real bang for the buck for taxpayers. We're going to have to spend a little money, but we've already been on a great trajectory over the last 10 years in disposing of space. You mentioned earlier that over 50% of our leases are coming out in the next 5 years. And although it's agency by agency, I'll tell you the trend is agencies are giving up space. They understand we're bringing our workspace experts to work with these agencies to say, how often are people in? What kind of work do you do? Maybe you don't need all of that space. Let's come back and let's give some of that space back.